Moving onwards. I once treated a Tae Eum individual with a dry throat, pale complexion, and diarrhea. This dry throat, pale complexion, and diarrhea that Ijima is talking about is the esophageal cold causing external cold syndrome. The dry throat itself is a sign that even though this person is having cold syndrome, that there are some heat signs. So again, this is the greater cold, lesser heat syndrome. The pale complexion is a sign of cold signs, and the diarrhea, especially if it's darker, uncontrollable, and accompanied by fatigue, is usually a sign of esophageal cold. If this is burning diarrhea, reddish diarrhea, or yellowish diarrhea, which is incomplete, that would be a sign of true heat or greater heat syndrome. In most cases, a dry throat indicates internal liver heat syndrome, while a pale complexion and diarrhea indicate external esophageal cold syndrome. Hence, this was a very serious condition in which both the exterior and interior were inflicted with the illness. I concluded that this individual has contracted a warm febrile disease. Indeed, this warm febrile disease can be started by cold and then quickly progress towards heat with remaining cold signs. So that's what Ijima detected in this case, which took 20 days for him to overcome. During the first 6 days of illness, his stools were occasionally loose with bouts of diarrhea. The second 6 days were marked by loose stools without diarrhea, while the remainder of his time he experienced dry stools with 2 to 4 bowel movements a day. This dry stool is also indicating that there's some heat in the body drying the stool. So this is the liver heat, right? The liver is associated with the small intestine. So this would be drying of the stool in the small intestine. Remember, the small intestine is a member of the liver group. At first, I prescribed handa yeolsotang to get him through the acute phase, followed by jori paewontang. Jori paewontang is Ijema's regulate the interior and replenish the lung source decoction. Paewon. Paewon means lung source. Okay? Jori means regulate the interior. For 40 days in order to support his weakened constitution and save his life. So when is jori paewontang prescribed? It's prescribed when an individual is overcoming an illness. In other words, you get them through the acute phase by either clearing heat or clearing cold, and then you work on recovering the patient. So jori paewontang is a really good formula for weakened Tae Eum, weakened lungs, right? And so in any chronic illness, jori paewontang can help rebuild the strength of the Tae Eum individual, and is often used in the clinic even today. So let's look at, we saw handa yeolsotang before, okay, so we recognize it. And what's jori paewontang? Well, jori paewontang is actually very similar to handa yeolsotang, but you notice the main ingredient is maimendong. Now, maimendong has a horizontal movement. In other words, it goes directly to the lungs to support the lung function. In handa yeolsotang, you have maimendong here too, but it's only used 3.75 grams or 1 dong. Okay, this is 2 dong. Okay, 7.5 grams. So, but the other ingredients here, just like you see here, are upward and downward vertical movement herbs, helping send the yin downwards from the lungs, okay, and helping send the yang upwards from the liver. So in both of these formulas you have huang jin. This helps send the energy upwards from the liver. But we also have jiegung. We have jiegung here too. Yiren, mahuang, laifazi. These are all herbs that help send the yin down. Mahuang also has the effect of diaphoresis. In other words, dispersing as well. Okay, acrid aromatic herb. And so similar formula, but much more supporting of the lungs. So what's really neat about having formulas that are similar in Sasang medicine is that you can basically transfer from one to the other without really experiencing side effects. If you go from one formula and radically change to another, sometimes the body has trouble adjusting. So it's very possible that, say, we have a handa yosotang situation, but we do want to support this person a little bit more than just clear the pathogen or help the energy flow upwards and downwards. So we might want to add more maimendong to handa yosotang, and then it looks much like joripaewantang. But joripaewantang is much simpler than the handa yosotang, and it's not focused on as much as the handa yosotang on clearing the pathogen. Okay, so this is a good formula for very weak, because it's simple. So very weak Tae Eum has trouble maybe digesting a lot of herbs. Handa yosotang has more herbs in it. Okay, you're also not too worried about phlegm in the lungs with joripaewantang as much as we are with handa yosotang, and that's why we have Jinnen, okay, and also Yiren as 11.25 grams. We have only 7.5 grams here. So this is going to do more helping descend the yin. Okay. Also, you see more diarrhea with this handa yosotang, but you do not see it as much with joripaewantang. Okay. As we have seen, from the onset of his illness, this individual experienced both loose stool and diarrhea. After 6 days of illness, sweat began to appear on his forehead and temple, and then his zygomatic arch. So where is this sweat going again? Forehead, temple, zygomatic arch, so it's going down, okay? And so that's a good sign. We wanted to do that, right? At this point, his appetite and daily activity level were occasionally back to normal. He started my herbal regime on the 6th day of illness. The next day he began to sweat profusely from the frontal hairline downward to the lips and chin. What's this starting to look like? This is starting to look like the Hanjue syndrome, right? So this is actually Hanjue syndrome with the warm fever disease mixed in, right? Also, note that his sweat went down to his zygomatic arch, but then it went back up, right, from the hairline. It didn't go down to the chest. Remember, with Hanjue, the deeper the sweat goes, starting from up above, the more certain that we will overcome this illness. Now, anywhere along the way, if the Tae Eum sweats profusely, they will overcome the illness. So even if they don't get all the way down to the chest, but they sweat it out enough, they overcome. But in this type of situation, he didn't sweat enough. He still was able to go from the forehead down to the zygomatic arch, but then it went back up again, okay? However, shortly after, his lips turned a purplish color, indicating cold, okay? And his speech became unclear, again, indicating cold toxin, blocking the orifices. On the 8th and 9th day, not only did his speech remain unclear, but also he experienced a loss of hearing, more yin toxin, more yin accumulation, blocking the orifices, yin cold. At this point, he stopped sweating around his lips and began to sweat at the zygomatic arch. Okay, so it's going upwards, not downwards. Shortly afterwards, he stopped sweating at the zygomatic arch and began to sweat at the temple. This sweat, which was shaped like small rice grains, very, very tiny little beads, appeared and then disappeared, and then reappeared again at his forehead, followed by labored breathing. So it's not enough sweat. It's not enough. The beaded sweat is actually a better sign than the sticky sort of film sweat that doesn't form beads, right? So it's a little bit of scenario, but not much. On the night of the 10th day of the illness, his forehead sweat disappeared and his unclear speech and lack of hearing became significantly worse. His throat was so congested. Okay, so this is, for the Tae Eum individual, it's really common when they have a cold or if they have trouble overcoming a cold that their throat gets very congested, okay? And phlegm getting stuck in the throat. So this can, you see, like sometimes the Tae Eum individual in the clinic that when they talk, it sounds like as if they have phlegm stuck in their throat. It's kind of like they're always constantly clearing the phlegm as they speak, okay? If you've heard a Tae Eum like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, congested with stagnant phlegm that he tried to scoop out with his finger. On the 11th day, his shortness of breath worsened, but on the 12th day, he was surprisingly capable of ingesting 2 bowls of rice porridge. Okay, so the yin is sinking, right? If we can ingest food, that means our yin is sinking. Our yin, not sinking, but descending. Yin is descending, okay? And his zeng qi, righteous qi, is winning the battle. For the above situation, I felt that xiongdan, this is bear gallbladder, would be the medicine of choice. But since it was not available, I thought that he would definitely not survive in the evening. However, his breathing began to improve early in the evening, and at dawn of the next day he began to sweat from his temple. So obviously Handayoso Tang is fine. If we don't have bear gallbladder, which nobody in the modern day clinic will, then Handayoso Tang, easier to get hold of, don't have to hurt any animals, and it's a very, very good formula to have on hand. Handayoso Tang. From the 14th to the 17th day of illness, he was able to consume 3 bowls of rice porridge. During this time, he started to sweat little by little from his forehead, temple, and zygomatic arch, while his purplish complexion began to lighten. So he's starting to sweat again. Good. And it's starting to descend. On the 6th day, he started to sweat from his chest. Yay! Chest sweat. Remember how we talked about that's a very good sign in the Hanjue syndrome? And was gradually able to expectorate phlegm. So as he's sweating from the chest, he's also activating the qi of his chest, and that helps the lungs expectorate the phlegm, right? With the which helped improve the clarity of his speech. On the 12th day, he began sweating profusely from his chest, and he was finally able to walk around his room. At this point, despite his recovery from the second bout of warm fever disease, his hearing did not improve. His hearing did not improve. However, his hearing and impeded eyesight finally improved after prescribing a total of 40 days of prescribed Jori Pewontang. So Jori Pewontang is what helped him recover. Okay. So Jori Pewontang, a good formula to help post-acute stage illness of the Tae Eum individual.